During the colonial period, trade in Indian goods played a key role for European navigators and merchants. This is why trading companies were established that had the support of their governments. One prominent example is the development and competition of the East India Companies. These companies capitalized on India's weakness and fought to expand their influence in the region. The French East India Company was the first to employ Indian soldiers known as sipayas. These soldiers were trained in European military arts and formed into fighting units under the command of French officers. In exchange for military support, in feuds between local principalities, the French received trading privileges. The French East India Company not only engaged in trade, but also took a role in managing foreign and domestic trade in some Indian principalities. They were even involved in supplying the army and collecting taxes. Seeing the success of the French, the British East India Company also started forming their own Sipayan units. This caused armed clashes between European powers for influence in India, which eventually led to a series of conflicts known as the Anglo-French Wars in India. The first serious clashes between France and Britain in India occurred during the War of the Austrian Succession. In September 1746, a French fleet under the command of Bertrand François de la Bourdonnais landed near Madras and began its siege. The fortifications of Madras were not strong enough, and after only 3 days of bombardment, the city surrendered to the French. La Bourdonnais offered to return Madras to the British for a ransom, but this plan was cancelled by Joseph-François Dupleix, the French Governor-General of India. The situation became more complicated when Anwaruddin Khan, the Nawab of Carnatic, entered the conflict on the side of the British. A combined force of the Nawab and the British army attempted to regain control of Madras, but was defeated by the French. In response, the English army besieged Pondicherry, a French stronghold in India, but was forced to retreat after 31 days. The conflict ended in 1748 year with the conclusion of the Second Peace of Aachen. Under the terms of this agreement, Dupleix agreed to return Madras to Britain in exchange for Louisbourg, located in North America. After the peace treaty between England and France, the two powers could not engage in direct military confrontations, but they found a way around this restriction by supporting local rulers in their internal conflicts. A particularly active struggle raged for influence over the rulers of the Deccan, Nizam of Hyderabad, and the Nawab of Carnatic. Joseph-François Dupleix, the French Governor-General in India, managed, through intrigue and 2 secret assassinations, to install his proxies in these posts. In the year 1751, a struggle for influence in Carnatic unfolded. The French candidate Chanda Sahib attacked the British claimant Valaj and besieged him in the fortress of Tiruchirappalli, receiving support from a French detachment under Charles de Bussy. At this critical moment, on the 1st of September, British Captain Robert Clive took a bold step. His small detachment of 280 Europeans and 300 Sipayans suddenly captured Arcot, the capital of Carnatic. This move was calculated to force Chanda Sahib to divert some of his forces to regain control of the capital. In response, Chanda Sahib sent a large force, including 4,000 Indians and 150 Frenchmen, to besiege Arcot. The siege was long and strenuous. The walls of the city were damaged in several places, but Clive did not surrender and sought help from Murari Rao, one of the Maratha warlords. The Maratha approach led the besiegers to offer Clive surrender for a large sum of money, but he refused. On the 24th of November, a general assault on the fort began, which was not successful for the besiegers. The next morning, they were forced to retreat, leaving behind their artillery and property. The victory at Arcot was a key moment for the British in the struggle for Carnatic. It enabled them to establish Valaju as the Nawab of Carnatic. Siraj-ud-Dowlah, the Nawab of the Principality of Bengal, was distrustful of the activities of European trading companies in the region. At a time when English and French trading companies began fortifying their forts in anticipation of a possible war, Siraj-ud-Dowlah imposed a ban on such activities without his permission. Failing to receive obedience from the British, the Nawab gathered an army of 3,000 soldiers and besieged the British trading post at Cosim Bazar on the 24th of May, 1757. The commander of the British side at Cosim Bazar, Watts, appealed for help to the leadership in Calcutta, but there it was decided not to weaken the garrison of the city. Watts had only 50 men and a few pieces of artillery. He was counting on the possibility of paying a ransom to avoid an attack, but the Nawab ordered an assault on the fortifications. The first attack was successfully repelled by the defenders. Watts was subsequently summoned to negotiate, and on arriving at the meeting he was taken prisoner. On the 5th of June, Qasim Bazar fell to the Nawab's forces, and on the same day, Siraj-ud-Dawla sent his forces to Calcutta. Siraj-ud-Dawla, despite the sweltering season and the need to use slow draft animals such as elephants and oxen, managed to march 160 miles to Calcutta in just 11 days. He mobilized an army of 50,000 men, but many of the soldiers were reluctant to march, with rumors spreading among them of the impending doom of the whole army. The British, anticipating hostilities, began preparations for defense from the 20th of May, recruiting local riflemen and stockpiling food. On the 7th of June, the commander of the fort at Calcutta requested assistance from Madras and appealed to the Dutch and French for support, but they refused to participate in the conflict. The Calcutta fortifications were severely short of artillery and ammunition, and howitzer shells had such poor fuses that they exploded almost as soon as they were fired. There was also a shortage of military men. There were only 180 Portuguese among the regular troops. On the 8th of June, 250 militia members were formed from among the British, Portuguese, and Armenians. By the 11th of June, Governor Drake could muster only 515 men who were distributed to batteries and redoubts for defense. On the 16th of June, the siege of Calcutta began. The army of the Nawab Siraj-ud-Dawla approached the city and attacked Perrin's redoubt, but was successfully repulsed by the defenders. On the 18th of June, the Nawab's troops began bypassing the fortifications of Calcutta, penetrating into the city. This forced the British troops to retreat to the main fort. On the 19th of June, it was decided to begin evacuation, and the first to be sent on ships were the women. A general evacuation was planned for the 20th of June, but on the 19th of June it became clear that the powder in the fort had run out, and Governor Drake had left the fort. As a result, the Nawab troops entered the fort unopposed on the 20th June, and the British troops gathered the remaining refugees and sailed by ship down the river. On the 26th of June, they reached the Dutch factor of Fulta. On receiving news of the fall of Calcutta on the 16th of August, the governor of Madras met with the council the very next day to discuss further action. Admiral Watson suggested immediate action to retake Calcutta, using a small military force, and then launching a larger expedition once the rains were over. He also expressed fears of a possible war with France and the threat of a French fleet to Madras during his absence. As a result of discussions in which Robert Clive participated, it was decided to send several ships with a military contingent of 240 men to Bengal. By the 21st of September, it was clear that war with France would not be forthcoming, and it was decided to launch the Bengal expedition under the command of Colonel Robert Clive. On the 16th of October 1756, the British fleet, consisting of 528 infantrymen, 900 Sipaians, and 109 artillerymen, left Madras. The north wind first carried the fleet towards Ceylon, from where they had to head for the coast of Burma, and then to the mouth of the Hooghly River. On the 1st January of the year 1757, the British discovered the abandoned fort of Tana, and the very next day, the 2nd of January, they set out in the direction of Calcutta. On the same day, a detachment under the command of Airy Coote successfully occupied the Calcutta fort. Robert Clive and Admiral Watson were actively engaged in planning a military campaign against the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dawla. On the 9th of January, they successfully captured the town of Hooghly, along with its grain reserves, an important strategic success. The fortifications of Hooghly were destroyed to prevent their reuse by the enemy, after which the British troops returned to Calcutta on 19th January. At this time, the outbreak of war between England and France became known, adding an additional threat to British interests in India. Clive therefore set out to strengthen the defenses of Calcutta. Clive also drew on his personal experience and knowledge of local conditions to conclude that military units should be created from the local population. He recruited several hundred Hindus and formed the 1st Regiment of Bengal Native Infantry. After the attack on Hooghly and realizing the precariousness of his position due to a possible revolt in the army, Siraj al-Dawla took steps to begin negotiations with the British. His appeal to Robert Clive to begin negotiations mediated by the French was a clear acknowledgement that he was looking for a peaceful solution to the conflict. Clive, in turn, presented a list of demands that reflected the British East India Company's desire not only to be compensated for losses suffered, but also to greatly expand its rights and opportunities in Bengal. These demands included full compensation for the losses suffered by the British, the securing of all privileges previously granted to the company in Bengal, the right to fortify its settlements as it saw fit, the right to establish a mint at Calcutta. On the 30th of January, when the Nawab's army of Siraj al-Dawla crossed the river near Hooghly, an important turn in the Bengal campaign began. The Nawab offered the French to join his forces to jointly expel the British, promising them various privileges in return. However, the French refused the offer. By the 3rd of February, the vanguard of the Nawab's army had approached the outskirts of Calcutta. At this point, the Nawab approached Clive with the message that his troops had entered Calcutta solely to find a suitable campsite. He also offered to negotiate, to which Clive responded by sending Welsh and Scrafton as ambassadors. On the 4th of February, the Nawab received the ambassadors, but refused to leave Calcutta and began to delay their return, using various pretexts. As a result, the embassy had to escape secretly from the Nawab's camp at night. The next day, on the 5th of February, there was a skirmish between Clive's army and the Nawab's forces on the outskirts of Calcutta. After this clash, the Nawab retreated and agreed to peace talks. These events marked the end of the first phase of the Bengal campaign, during which the British not only regained control of Calcutta, but also greatly strengthened their position in the region by forcing the Nawab to make concessions and negotiate.